welcome back to second session on the final day. We've got a very exciting session for you now on photography. Make some noise, first of all, for Lisa Stonehouse. And hosting this session from Screen Yorkshire, it is Richard Knight. Over to you.
Be interesting.
I feel I might have been over bigged up
yeah,
there.
no, slightly.
Right, so basically we've got Lisa here, photographer. We're going to do about half-hour sort of fairly informal chat about the world of photography. Then we'll open it to you guys for Q&A basically. But if you've been to any of my sessions before, quite like informal. So yeah, get some questions ready. So first and foremost, does anyone here call themselves a photographer? Anyone here a photographer? 1, 2, 3. That it? Has anyone got a mobile? Who's got a mobile phone? What? So your galleries on your phone are completely empty then? You've got no pictures on there whatsoever. You don't use the camera function on your phone, no? We're all bloody photographers, aren't we? We've all got phones. We're taking pictures all the time. I have to clear them off because my storage is so massive. So we're constantly photographing. Do you not look at photos and go, oh, that's a really good one. That's really good. Any quality control on what pictures you take at all? Yes, yeah, loads of people do. There you go. You're photographers, and you're also discerning photographers as well. So hopefully this will be an interesting session for you. Maybe get some tips on how to make them better. Great. So Lisa, do you just want to do a little mini intro where you're at? How did you get to here? Don't say in the car.
Thank you for coming. Apologies to anybody who's heard my kind of backstory before. I'll try and keep it a bit brief. So I've been shooting for about 16 years. I started off doing a completely different degree. I did languages, and then travel around the world, became a picture editor for 8 years in London on national magazines and newspapers, and then became a photographer. So I started out doing, and I didn't actually study. I studied at Central St Martin's. I did as many evening classes as I could. And I just used to I did that for about 3 years. So I would say while you're here, just absolutely take advantage of every opportunity that you've got in terms of facilities, studios, other students, collaborations, just build all of those things and networks as well as you can while you're here. So I kind of started off doing, like a lot of people do, weddings, portraits, got myself into a bit of a hole doing weddings because it pays quite well. And then you sort of find, I've tied myself up for the next 2 years doing something I never really wanted to do. No offence to weddings. I kind of used to do them and think, eventually, all of this experience will be really useful because you're doing a reportage, you're doing a story, it's really important. None of those people will ever be in a room again because within a couple of years, some of them have died or divorced or, won't be speaking to each other. So you've kind of got to make it as good as you can in that moment, and it is really pressured, to be honest. So everything that you do is good experience. So I went from weddings, portraits, then moved into commercial advertising, and then in the last few years I've been building myself up into films, which is where I met Richard, Screen Yorkshire. So it takes a little while to find your voice and your style and what you're good at, and I'd just say it is quite a big reflection on you, your personal interests, who you are. What's going to make your photography better than somebody else's is if you're deeply into the subject and you're quite excited and you don't think of it as work. So my kind of areas that I shoot now are unit stills and behind the scenes on films. I got into that through Richard at Screen Yorkshire. They advertised about 4 years ago for people who had relevant experience in the industry but didn't have any networks or contacts in film. And there are so many amazing places, aren't there, like Screen Yorkshire, Screen Sales, BFI, Film Hub North, where you can look at to kind of get training and experience and make contacts and networking. And one of the things I've only just woken up to recently is how absolutely crucial networking is. And I go to creative breakfast now and networking events, and I see students who are already coming out and they're already handing out the cards and they're already meeting people. And you've absolutely got to get in there as quickly as you can, just so people start to know you, know your face. And then they'll think about you, and just talking to people you find out what's going on and who's got projects that you might be interested in. So anyway, going back to what we did, Richard had like a funding, so created a film set at Wentworth House. And so there was lighting and sparks, wasn't there, and sound and unit stills. So it was a film set, but you weren't under the constraints and stress of filming. So there was a unit stills photographer, Dean Rogers, who shoots for Shane Meadows and pretty much every major film worldwide, came up and mentored myself and one other person. And it was just amazing. It was 2 days with Dean, and he just said something that was just absolutely fundamentally huge when we were shooting. He said, "I like your work, it's all great, but just make sure you put a lot of emotion in the face." And it was like a kind of 5-second comment that just changed everything that I then tried to shoot and present on my site. And then since then, Richard recommended me for short films. So I've done like about 3 short films. You start off doing it just for expenses, and then you build up to a bit of a day rate and then a proper day rate. And then I've been lucky enough to get onto 2 feature films, Peter Strickland's Flux Gourmet and with Asa Butterfield. And that's interesting how that came about. Facebook groups, if any of you are shooting on film sets, is a fantastic way of getting work. There's loads of them. That was a York filmmakers Facebook group that I thought would be full of people shooting sparrows and, you know, nature and stuff like that. No offence on nature shooters. But I thought it would be kind of a nice, sedate little group. And there was this thing saying, you know, we're doing an exciting feature at Selby Town Hall. You know, get in touch, we need a stills photographer. So I went down and I met a girl called Serena Armitage, who was really pleasant and easygoing and unassuming. And then I went home and I Googled her and I saw her getting her Oscar for a short film, Stutterer. And then I didn't know Asa Butterfield or Gwendolyn Christie was on the film at all. But we talked about a rate and something we might get into more, or I can get into now.
Yeah, it's low budget, that film.
Yeah, so they only had a certain amount of money, which was 500 quid, which for me as a unit stills is a day rate. So they said, well, we can only afford to get you in for 2 half days. And this is where you've got to be creative and you've got to think, how much is this going to help me? You know, how much can I help them? What can I do? So I said, well, I'd like a lot more content than 2 half days and I'm sure it'd be useful to you. So I went about 8 or 9 different times. And that's the biggest film I've got on my CV. And the one that when I meet the chair of BAFTA at a short film festival the other day, her eyes open and she goes, oh, Peter Strickland. So if you can get in there, don't worry too much about the money at the beginning. If it's something that's going to open doors for you and look good on your CV, be creative and offer them more time and more content and be helpful.
You've covered quite a lot of ground.
Sorry.
There. It's all right, don't worry, no worries at all.
Talking too
No,
much.
there is a relevance to this, but I am genuinely, there is a relevance to this question, but I'm genuine because it will carry on through. I'm genuinely curious, when you did wedding photographies, did you meet many bridezillas? Was it like, were you being asked to do stuff that were just mind-blowingly crazy?
Well, it's funny actually, because I ended up not enjoying it towards the end of it, only because weddings have become like this big, huge...
Yeah, they're big events now.
Yeah,
Drone
like this big,
photography.
huge
And
Pinterest-worthy event. It wasn't so much about the couple getting married and having a party and having their friends. It was about, have you noticed this little feature that we've done? Have you taken so all the guests as well, do you appreciate what we've done with this, all these elements that they wanted to look
So it became more
Pinterest-worthy.
social media photography rather than
But I met
you
loads of
capturing
nice
the event
brides.
for different purposes. It's
Yeah.
not going in a wedding album that they look back on.
No,
It's
they just
going
want it to look
instantly
good.
online.
Yeah, they want it to be on
That's
Instagram and
fascinating.
look really great. And also, you know, people are spending vast amounts of money, and it just made me feel a bit sad that they were spending that much money for something they didn't really need to.
Yeah.
It's essentially a party,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay.
A 30 grand party.
Yeah. So moving it. So you were doing. So then you were doing then your fashion photography and things like that for the magazines.
Well, I did when I was with magazines. It was more I was picture editor.
Picture editor. Yeah.
But the editorial stuff has always had like a heavy leaning on people. So
Yeah.
it's my kind of route went in more so like sports reportage. So I started, and this is where you will get your breaks. Like, and if something looks, if you can give your time at the minute, you know, you can sort of go along. And I shot. It was just a little PR shoot for Northern Ballet, taking pictures of a ballerina in Phoenix in York doing a Christmas shoot. Well, that turned into a 10-year-long relationship shooting behind the scenes for Northern Ballet. So think about who it is you're doing it for. And even if it's like, oh, it's a little PR shoot, I don't want to do that. You know, think about the doors that it might open. And it's all about relationship building.
Okay. So for a lot of people, just staying as picture editor and doing that would be sufficient. What was the drive to get to want to do things like getting into film and doing unit stills?
Well, that was like, so I realised that I love doing behind the scenes, and I realised that I've always loved behind the scenes on-set photography. Brigitte Lacombe, Greg Williams does all the Bond stuff, so I've always had a real interest. And I used to think, when I was a picture editor, when I used to edit their shoots coming in, oh, that's the dream. You know, I'd absolutely love to shoot that. And it is really. It sort of suits me down to the ground in terms of what I'm like as a person and the kind of way that I shoot. There's lots of different elements to it, which I like.
Cool. Okay. I just wonder which order to go in things. So now, if you're doing unit stills and you're invited to go to a set, what are the sort of challenges if you're there? Because generally, film sets they've got a finite amount of time, and they've always got more to shoot actually through the film camera in any given day.
Yeah.
How's your approach to kind of getting the stuff that they're going to need?
Oh yeah, well that's a really good question. Well done, Richard. Good question. Because it's all about, that's just having a coercive, in a nice way, polite nature with a gentle persistence. So you kind of you have your chats with the director and you talk to a producer and you know the things that they need. But then once it comes to filming, you are the only person on set that's not necessary to making a film. So it's your job to stay out of the way, but know what they need later and know what's going to be important to them and make sure that you get it. So you're constantly waiting. Like there's a film I put on my Instagram actually, which was, we were shooting in an alleyway. That was the short film, How to Disappear. And I was watching them shoot for about 3 hours, and you gently ask, oh, is now a good time to shoot? And is now isn't. But most of the time they're so focused on getting the film right, which is right, because that's what they're there for and that's what everybody's there for. Your job is to just kind of remind them gently when they finish 3 hours of shooting in an alley, oh, is it okay if we just do that quick run through? And then you do that quick run through and that becomes the poster image that they put absolutely everywhere. But if you hadn't have reminded them gently, can we just do that? Can we grab that? They would have forgotten and there wouldn't be that poster image that they wanted. It is your job to remember that stuff, but not to harass them. And so quite often if filming is tight and they haven't got a lot of time, I ask to shoot during rehearsals. So they always rehearse a take before they shoot a take. So I quite often ask, can we kind of just shoot during rehearsals? Because to me, most of the time, that's going to look exactly the same. And then if things are, you know, maybe it's a difficult scene or things are tight on time, you can then just step aside because at the end of the day, you're another lens for people to look at, which is quite off-putting. If they just want to look down the main camera lens and you're there as well, doing your stuff, even though you feel invisible, you're there, you know, and so it's quite nice to kind of shoot and then get out of the way.
Yeah, but then you can they'll also schedule a bit of time for you as well to get.
Not really.
I've had it before.
Sometimes,
you can get actors off to one side, and sometimes, sometimes you might not have done it yet, but sometimes the poster shot is posed.
Oh yeah, no, we do that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like on Berchanga Green, so I just shot one film 4 one, which is like a sci-fi one, Berchanga Green, and that was kind of one of the first times that the producer had said to me, I'd like you to shoot the subject within the world of the film, but not actually as a unit still. Because that worried me quite a lot, because I didn't want to tread on the toes of the cinematographer and the DOP by picking an image that wasn't what they'd chosen to create. But producers really like it, that it's like a narrative of the film, but with the subject in it. But then I feel bad, because I think, well, I've taken a little walk through with them and done a quick shot, and that's become the poster image, and they've spent 3 years in production, and God knows how many months picking compositions and sets.
Yeah, I was talking to
It is what it is.
I was talking to a producer yesterday though, but if anything goes onto Netflix, on Netflix for the shots, no screen grabs are allowed. They can't. It has to be original stills photography to go on Netflix.
Right.
And Netflix.
Oh, that's good to know.
What's fascinating as well. Sorry, this is a slight aside, but it is related to photography. What's fascinating? People have Netflix accounts. Yeah, different ones. Yeah, okay. If you ever compare your Netflix to someone else's Netflix, it will look completely different because the algorithm of the stills that they choose to entice you to watch that thing are different.
Okay. Right.
So a friend of mine produced a film called Caliber, and they got about 8 different selections of pictures from the film, but not screen grabs. And so if you watch buddy movies, the picture that Netflix will give to you is for caliber is the two blokes who are in it together, a shot of the two of them together. Whereas if you watch loads and loads of gory horror movies, the still you get from Caliber is one of the more gory pictures with blood and stuff. Yeah, so, and Rachel, who produced it, said when they came onto Netflix, after Netflix bought it, when they watched it on their own Netflix, when they saw it come up on their own Netflix, the still that it was suggesting to them was their favourite of the 8 that they sent in. Yeah, amazing.
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
so aside, but yeah, so
that's
you'll
good to
get
know.
that's might be why they're asking you that that you need. They can't just do Netflix won't let them do screen grabs
So it's
to
got to be a
advertise the
still.
shoot. It's got to be original stills photography. So there
And
you
I've
go.
been on Flux. I didn't really get much time to do any unit stills. We only did the one in the bedroom. That was the only run through. Everything else was behind the scenes. And the pictures of Asa, like you said, that was time to take aside to do portraits.
Yeah.
So you do your unit stills, you do your behind the scenes, and then you do your portrait sessions with the actors. And I wanted to get him as Asa Butterfield, really, but he says his hair's nothing like that. So we did them all in character.
Yeah. So in taking photography, then we'll go into I'd love to ask you more about the techie stuff, and just sort of composition and things. But first and foremost, you're obviously a consummate photographer of people. I'm not so good at that.
Yeah.
Buildings. I'm getting slightly better now, but
Yeah.
buildings and things that don't move and have faces that I can get wrong.
Yeah.
So are you dealing with subjects that can be sometimes difficult, people that can be difficult? And how do you approach that if someone's just generally either hasn't got the time for you or is just not in the zone that you're not getting them?
Yeah, well, it's difficult. If you've got time, then you just don't get in their way if you can and come back at another time or another point. It's all about trying to build a relationship of trust really quickly and for them to like you and for them to trust you that you're going to show them in a nice light and a good light. And if they're having a bad moment or they're trying to, rehearse something that's difficult, just come back later, just leave them alone. Just try to make their life easier and simpler and capture them at a better time. But a lot of it's like when you start to shoot somebody, don't just present a camera in their face because it's quite arresting, really. Just sort of build a little bit of chat. And it's really easy to build a chat with somebody. You just talk to them about what they're doing and what their project's about and what they're interested in. So you get them in the zone of thinking. I made a mistake once. I was shooting, I can't remember his name, it was a Tour de France cyclist. And we were doing just quite a quick little shoot for Cyclist magazine. And then I said, oh, how's training going? And he was just like, bang, he was gone. He was just like, oh, yeah, no, I need to get back to it. And I'd lost him. So, never mention anything where they need to be somewhere else or doing something else. Keep them present with you in that moment for as long as you can. And tell them you'll be really quick and it'll be really fast. And keep things moving fast so it is quick. But don't remind them of all the stuff they've got going on outside, because then you have lost them.
Yeah, I'm a massive Tour de France fan. So when I first saw your website, it was Thomas Vogler.
Thomas Vogler.
Yeah, it's mega. Yeah, legend. Awesome. So great. So are there times when you're out there? So in terms of volume of photographs, are you just absolutely photographing the crap out of everything?
Yeah, I'm useless. But I am useless actually. You're probably miles better than me. I shot 9,000 pictures for Birching Green.
Wow.
9,000.
Wow.
It was a nightmare. But the reason was because it was so low light, because it's a sci-fi. So I had it on an all right ISO, about 1600. I didn't really want to go much beyond that. But I had it on a really fast frame sports shooting so that I could just shoot multiple in this really low light conditions because it was handheld, it wasn't tripod held or anything. Yeah. So you guys will all have a much better workflow than I will. I'm crap at that.
Yeah, but you're in good company. I've not to name drop or anything, but I worked with Martin Parr, and his assistant was saying that what his genius is as a photographer. And like Martin Parr photography, look up Martin Parr if you don't know Martin Parr. Flipping out, unbelievable. It's been like big influence on my own location scouting photography and stuff, because I've worked on things like This Is England and other films that are sort of representing sort of life in Britain, and Martin Parr stuff's amazing. But what his assistant said, he takes freaking thousands of pictures, and what he's really good at is curating the images that go out, rather than being the person, rather than being that kind of war photographer or whatever who catches that one amazing moment. He'll take thousands and he'll pick the one rather than take the one. So you're
supposed to edit in rather than edit out. So you're supposed to look at your overview and pick out the ones that are great.
Yeah. So in terms of kit then, starting out, when you first started out, was it all on film and exposing, or have you been digital from the start, really?
No, like for me, I used to have a Mamiya 645, and I used to shoot film, but it was, for me, and everybody's different, it was exorbitantly expensive.
Yeah.
So for me, it kind of took off when I went into digital. Then I started out with Canon 5Ds, had that for a very long time, and now I shoot with Sony A9, and I really, really like Sony's a lot.
Cool, great. And then other peripheral kit do you take with you?
Yeah.
You taking a tripod? Have you got your own lights? Do you have
Yeah, so I take so I have 2 Sony A9s, and it's nice to have 2 of the same thing, because then if something goes wrong, you're just flipping to another camera that does the same job. You're not kind of... Once I shot a wedding and my main camera broke, and I hated my backup, so I never used it. And it broke right at the beginning of the wedding, and then I was like, oh no, it's not even full frame. So that was a lesson.
Yeah.
Sweating from everywhere, palms everywhere. And so have like a backup that's the same, or as similar as, that you can. And then other kit, I have a couple of lights. I have a couple of Profoto B1 lights, but they'll go up to like, I can put a big 150 octa and I can shoot a group with it. And I've always tried to buy nice kit, buy second-hand kit, but buy good stuff that you can kind of grow into, and you don't end up being limited by your equipment. It's not always possible, a lot of equipment's really amazing now, but I bought really nice lenses, because you suddenly look through a shot and you go, that looks really professional. Lenses are quite a big deal.
So if we were doing a still shoot in here, say, what do you think? I'm personally, as a photographer, I'm not a huge fan of like white walls and things.
Yeah.
It would just be, I'd find this quite difficult. Would you? And I'm not, and I work with directors who aren't a fan of this colour blue.
Right.
Exactly this. I've had to excise it all from shots.
Oh,
so,
right, okay.
Yeah.
No, this room's it's not very flattering.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's
for
our
skin
excuse.
tone and light. It's just kind of quite, it's a good ambient light, but you'd be wanting to, so you can go into your colour balance and just correct it, just look in the back of your screen and just correct it to like fluoro or the tungsten or up and down the Kelvin. So when I'm on set, I look at the director of photography screen and they'll have the colour temperature, and I have to colour match that in the RAWs. So quite often I'm always asking, are we still 3,800? And they're like, yeah, we are. And then eventually they'll say, we're doing that for the whole film. And then I'll stop asking. But sometimes, you'll change whether you're inside, outside, that sort of thing. So remember to colour match. It saves you quite a bit of work if you can try and balance it out a little bit. So here, looking at your faces, it's all quite peachy and yellowy, and this in here would do well to have like an extra light put onto it, a flash, just to make it cleaner and purer and give some more contrast.
Yeah.
It's all quite soft.
But I think if as students wanting to take pics and doing things for their projects or whatever, you've got to not be afraid to just like pick a different place, just... Yeah.
Put a bit of fill flash in. You've all probably got camera phones that are a lot better than mine, like iPhones and stuff like that, and put a bit of fill flash on it, or go outside and get some cleaner light, or go by that window where there's if it was a bigger window, get some clean light, indirect light coming in from the outside.
Yeah. And then just composition-wise then, for there's not, I bet, are there any particular kind of rules or advice for like particular framing of people if you're trying to do either group shots or individuals?
I tend to stick to shooting square on. So I learned that from editorial. It's much easier if you're shooting square on and all the lines are 90 degrees for them to lay it into a spread than it is kind of shooting on an angle. If I shoot wide angle a lot now, which I didn't used to, 16 to 50, I think, is my wide angle lens, but I try and place the subject in the middle as much as possible. I don't like it when it looks too news photography, but that's me. And so like here, there's like loads of nice options really. I'd be square on and I'd have all of this empty and I'd have somebody in the middle of it, or I'd have somebody standing there. I quite like that wall with the grid. Yeah. Just like look at what other backdrops are. The walls, I'd stand somebody in that grey door and I'd have that as a grey backdrop as well.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different options. Put them in front of the screen.
Cool. So what you are now doing is obviously working as a freelancer and still kind of growing the unit stills side.
Yeah.
So are you finding it important now to do what's behind us, which is your Instagram and website and things like that?
Yeah. I was useless, actually, at Instagram. I didn't even put anything on for like ages. And so I've only just started networking. You kept getting me so many jobs. I didn't have to pull my finger out and start trying to find people for myself. And then you went on sabbatical and I was like, oh, hell.
Yeah.
So you can get yourself in a way of just working and working and working and not actually planning. If you get yourself where you're working so much and suddenly it stops, it will take you 2 or 3 months to get work coming back in again. So always be on that. Don't let that drop. But network, like I've never networked as much as I have in the last few weeks, and now it's constant.
You are
Constantly
everywhere I go, to be
networking.
honest.
But the thing is, you kind of need people to know, if they're thinking, oh, I need a stills photographer, you know, then you kind of need people to think of you. And they're not going to think of you if you're hiding away and not putting out your work. And it can be anything, you know, anything that you're working on. And you know, you just kind of use your Instagram. That's your business card. I've been to events where I've handed out my business cards and I've been super proud of myself, like that Film 4 one. And then I didn't take other people's email addresses. And then I really struggled to get in contact with them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I've handed over all the power to them, but you don't want to do that. You want to I take a notebook and I might give a business card out, but I'm writing down what their email address is, what they do, what I need to action up, what I need to go back, and so that you can start that conversation. Because if people get a direct email, more often than not, they're going to start talking to you.
You being a photographer as well, I think there is that versatility, especially as your back catalogue. You have done other things as well. So is that comforting to know that you don't have to, you want to pursue a particular unit stills in particular, but it's not like that or the dole. It's like there are other things you can do. So as a photographer, it's nice to have that kind of broad church. Yeah,
for me, I want to do unit stills and I want to do big commercial jobs that pay lots and lots of money. Basically, that's kind of what I want to do. That's what Dean does, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't just divulge what he told me. He got paid for the Lloyd's bank job that he did, but it was,
it would pay off my house,
yeah,
pretty much. So I kind of want to do creative stuff and then do commercial jobs. So I kind of now need to focus quite a lot on the networking and going and meeting agents. And you spend a while building your portfolio, and then I think eventually you come to a point where you go, oh, okay, like I think I need to start rolling this out now and start meeting people. But you guys will probably get into that a lot quicker than I did.
Yeah, but I think because you worked as a picture editor, you must have been that must have been useful for if you've had photography, because you're. I mean, what goes into that? You've got to work out being sent a portfolio of images from an event or a particular shoot.
Yeah.
You've got to pick what's going into the magazine, and so you've got to develop some kind of critical faculty. Do you then get the boss, the main editor, going, that picture's, why have you gone with that picture? Or do you have to kind of justify your choice?
Well, you work really tightly with your art director.
Yeah.
And you get to know your publication, and what it does do when you're critiquing everybody else's work all the time is it's brilliant, because you need to be doing this all the time, and I'm sure you are, looking at what your competitors are doing essentially and what everybody else is doing, and kind of looking at where you might sit in there. Like I kind of was looking at Art Department, which is a massive agency in New York and London, and there's a guy called Squire Fox who started out as a wedding photographer, and I happened to look at his work, and then I kind of half screen grabbed my opening page and I put it next to his, and I was like, oh, well, they're pretty much the same now.
Cool.
And that's taken quite a while to get to there, but you kind of think, so in some respects it holds you back, because I used to work for British Airways, High Life magazine and InStyle magazine, people like that, and we'd need to see a celebrity quite quickly on the first few pages to know that somebody was trustworthy enough to reach that level. But actually think things are a little bit more open now. You know, you can be shooting just locally and, you know, and shooting with film students and shooting with other marketing students and getting work, and if it's stylistically beautiful, it probably would get picked up. I think it's much less about having celebrities, things than it used to be.
We've nearly used our half hour.
Have we?
Can you believe it?
Have we said anything useful?
No, it's terrible.
Okay.
What do you have any favourite pictures on your Instagram?
Oh, I really love
anything that you've taken that you go,
this,
that is mint.
Oh
Yeah, there's a few really good ones in that.
So this skateboarding one, is it possible to scroll down the skateboarding one a bit? So you should be just shooting things that are really local to you. So there's a guy called Klaus Timon who's a photographer who's shot a lot for Adidas, Nike and all the rest of it.
Oh.
And he would say to me, like, shoot locally, what's on your doorstep? And this skateboarding shoot, so I surf, and a friend of mine wanted me to take some pictures of her skateboarding, And I did. I haven't put any of her up, which is quite bad of me, because I really like her, but she's not a very good skateboarder. And, and so I'll just give them to her for fun. But nothing in that was staged. I didn't know any of them. Nothing was groomed. This is just who they are. And the light was amazing, and it was in Scarborough. But to me, it kind of brought together a lot of what I like doing in stills. And I tried to think about the pace. I tried to think about action shots and portrait shots, close up and pull back and show the landscape. Always pull back and show everything, and then go in, sort of thing. And I'm going to use that as a promo. That was like a shoot out of nowhere, just a personal one where the light was right and the guys looked brilliant. And that boxing one, that was a free shoot. So my top 2 shoots, I've pretty much got just things that I did on my own. I wanted to shoot something that looked like a film still. So I thought, well, boxing looks like film, and I haven't shot boxing. So that was like a tiny little wreck. It's just a little, well, not that little, but it's a kickboxing thing in Cotmanthorpe. But just shoot it in a way, because people don't, not saying they don't have the imagination, but they need to see that you can do what it is they want you to do. So if you can do that in your own personal work, think, what do I want to do? Oh, I want to do unit stills, right, I'll shoot something that looks like it, and then you'll get a job shooting unit stills. But if nothing on your website shows the thing that you want to be doing, you probably won't necessarily get employed for it, unless somebody's got a great imagination.
Yeah. The next boxing film that comes to Yorkshire is being
do you know, I was talking to, and Instagram is amazing, right? I was talking to, what's his name? Johnny Frederick Tufton or something like that. Anyway, he looks after the media for Paddy the Baddy, is that right? Anyway, MMA fighter. And so I've liked his stuff, and then he's liked mine back, and I've gone, you know, if you need somebody to shoot behind the scenes, I'd love to do that. Sure. Instagram gives you access to all of these people. There's a guy, Art Stryber, who shoots for Vanity Fair, and I met him years ago as a picture editor. He puts up all his setups on his Instagram, so you know what his lighting is, and you know how he's gone about the shoot. But he then corresponds with everybody, and he'll answer questions and stuff. So it's amazing. So I was chatting with him this morning as well.
Cool.
And I'm like, that's Instagram. I'm chatting with somebody in New York who's just shot the Wakanda film. Wow. And I'm chatting to somebody who shoots Paddy the Baddy or whatever.
Wicked. Right, we will open it out. I've just got one other question. You did do some sports reportage, Tour de France stuff as well. So have you had, does that involve
sports stuff comes lower down, it keeps calm.
Has that involved like overseas assignments?
Yeah.
It's like they're quite good fun when you like
so find a niche. It's like I know these are pictures of blokes, but my niche with sports photography was shooting women cyclists. And
hero of mine.
So I wanted to shoot cycling, but women's cycling wasn't really getting represented very well. So pick something that's maybe not getting represented as well, so that you can get the access. I wouldn't have got access to shoot male cyclists because they're overrun with photographers who do that. But off the back of that, Cyclist magazine asked me to do portraits when people were up here for Tour de Yorkshire. But I've been to Venice, and I've been, I've been abroad. Sure. France. Yeah.
Very nice. A bit glam, isn't it? Well, any questions from?
Oh, look at that! Crikey!
I'm sold to the man up front.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the future of photography and how we take our pictures in a world where we can take photos easily with our phone.
Yeah.
I fear that digital cameras may become a little bit less relevant than they used to be. Is there something that digital cameras can do that phones cannot?
Yeah, sure. Well, at the minute, it's pure physical size, isn't it? So your phone camera, as long as you're just restricting it to the size of you could shoot these on a phone, really, if they're only going to go that big, and they're always going to have an illumination behind them. But if you want a poster, or if you want a billboard, or if you want, you've got to do that on something which has got a bigger and better sensor. And the glass that you're putting on, the lens that you're putting on you've got that versatility, you've got that kind of wide lens to telephoto lens. So I think it's brilliant that there are so many good camera phones around, and that's something we were going to talk about, wasn't it? Like, if you're on set, or if you're doing some work, or you're producing a documentary or something, and you can't afford a unit stills photographer, you can shoot a lot of the content yourself, because it will be going mostly on Instagram. It will be going on as a reel or TikTok or wherever you're going to put it, and it doesn't have to be massive. But I was at the film festival last week, Aesthetica, and the Bolton guy that runs the Bolton Film Festival said out of 300 films, only a third of them actually had a poster image, and they had to go and they had to grab a screen grab. But like you were saying, you know, stills grab, it doesn't always, it's not big enough, the quality isn't enough. So maybe all the way down the line, you'll have little attachments, or you'll have ways of having all that versatility in a phone. But it's leveled things out that you can do a lot yourself, but it's not as good as yet for the big stuff.
When I go location scouting now, going into people's houses, I've got a Canon 5D and I've got a really nice L series lens that cost me over £1,000. Do you know what it brings? Legitimacy.
Yeah.
I take all the pictures on my phone. But if I walked in with a phone, they'd go, "Who's this guy? He's some bloody burglar."
Yeah.
Whereas if I walk in with a camera around my neck, and then I'll go, "Oh," and I will sometimes take pictures with that as well, but most of the time on the phone, because I can move them around quicker. So yeah, it just adds legitimacy.
Yeah, and your lighting, you know, you're linking in your lighting as well, and you can't do that with a phone yet. So, you know, even just with, you know, one big octa or a couple of strip softboxes or something, you're making something really, you know, much more professional. So, good question.
So it's not completely dead.
So a question about if you're doing film behind the scenes stills and there's someone doing behind the scenes video, are there sort of challenges to that, or sort of is there, do you take it in turns in sort of in working with different departments, or is there hierarchy around that, or do you get the same sort of access that
there
they
is
get?
challenges around that, actually. That is kind of one, because you're both fighting for the same thing, and it's better really if you are potentially shooting at a different time, because suddenly like one lens is becoming 3 lenses, which is quite a lot of overkill for an actor. So quite often when I've been on set, they've scheduled the EPK to be at a different time.
That's electronic press kit.
Sorry, electronic press kit. So the videographer's coming in and shooting, you know, sort of behind the scenes action. And, you know, when I was on Flux, actually, Gwendolyn Christie, she'd had not a great experience with the EPK before. Nothing down to that particular person, but just that she'd felt like it was just too much to be filmed like that as well and have the lens. So she then went, "I don't want any unit stills. I can only be on one scene." And I was like, "Oh, that's such a shame, because you're massive, you know, and you look amazing." But it just is what it is. So you just have to work within the parameters of what you're given. But I think when you're actually physically doing it, if you're working side by side, you're just always checking that you're not in somebody's way, that you're not breaking into their view, you know, that you're not kind of nudging them.
Would you add EPK to your repertoire?
If you're
Just one
videographers,
person?
yes, 100%. Like not many people know about it or are doing it. So EPK is electronic press kit. So most of the films I've been on, I've been asked if I can shoot video. And for that, you might just need like a continuous light. You take the actors to one side, you sit, you do interviews with actors, you're shooting behind the scenes, and then you're presenting it all as a electronic kit. For social, so EPK is a really useful thing to market yourselves as.
Good way to get into the industry as well, because not many people know
Not many
about
people
it.
do it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So what advice would you give to students or any photographer around kind of approach? So for example, the shoot that you did in Scarborough there,
Yeah.
you know, that was kind of off the bat, the light was right, it was an
Yeah.
opportunity, you saw it,
Yeah.
you went for it. What might you, we had a theme this week about how actually just being nice can get you a long way.
Oh, massively.
And your approach to
Yeah.
people, can, you know, in that way. But is there any other specific advice that you'd give to students about what they might need to talk to the subjects about, anything you need to
Yes.
cover in terms of like privacy, that kind of thing?
Oh, yes. So, yeah, very much so. So that shoot in Scarborough, there was children there as well. So I went and told the parents of the children that I wasn't shooting them. Initially, just let them know that I'm just taking some pictures, but I won't be photographing your children. I had a big camera, so legitimacy, I think they thought, oh, we've got a big lens. You know, she probably knows what she's doing. And what I do is I kind of go up and just individually talk to people, try to get an introduction. So my mate introduced me, and then there was that breaking that barrier, which was useful. But if not, just make sure people know your intent, what you're taking the pictures for, why you're doing them, where they're going to go, and do they have access to them. And if they're giving you their time and letting you shoot them, then tell them that you're going to give them the pictures if they want it. And if they don't like something, you'll take it down, or you'll check with them beforehand. Just treat people like how you'd want to be treated. If somebody came up to me in the street and suddenly started snapping me, and I knew I looked, you know, rotten, or, you know, I wasn't in the mind frame for it, or I looked a mess, I kind of want to know where was that image going and how was it going to be used. So as long as everybody knows what you're doing, what your background is, then once you start shooting, get a really good one and just with a really poker face just go, is that all right? That's the kind of thing I shoot. And just really play it down. And then they go, oh, you know, that's awesome. And then they're on board with you. And then they're all showing off and then they're all wanting to be photographed.
Did you send those skateboarders their pictures?
Yeah, I
God,
put them
I
on.
bet they
Yeah,
loved
yeah.
them,
No, they're
didn't they?
really happy with them. The mountain BMXer was really, really happy as well. But then, you know, there's a girl who shoots already, who's a friend of theirs. So you might be treading on people's toes and stuff as well. So,
Yeah.
you know, you've got to be careful of treading on existing relationships too.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
My question is about freelancing. So I've done some freelancing like for the past 5 years, and I'm wanting to make like a social media page now.
Yeah.
But all my photos like include people, but the problem is I don't have contact with these people anymore. So it's like, what do I do? Like,
That's a good question.
Permissions.
Yeah, permissions. So, well, so you don't have contact with any of them. Were they on jobs? Were they
Yeah.
Yeah. So they allowed you to shoot it knowing it was probably going to go on a website? I would say if they knew it was going to go on a website, you could put it on your Instagram because they're compliant in that already. I mean, just be really careful around children, minors, underage, you know, just don't put anything up of a child without a written permission. And if there's anybody you think could be difficult or awkward, I mean, there's usually ways of contacting people, isn't there? Even if you search them out through a website or an Instagram, and it's quite a lengthy business sometimes, getting all your permissions, but you want to cover yourself just in case. So it might just be a question of doing a bit of research on Instagram and pinging some messages off. And then if you think something might be contentious, don't run it. And just start with, you know, the ones you can, and then just start now building up with new work.
Right, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it can be a bit of a grey area, but you've just got to think about. I definitely take your point with the kids, minors,
keep
whatever.
away from that, yeah.
But if you are taking pictures generally, and people see your camera and are there for your photography, then there's a certain assumption that it's going to go places. Then if they do take exception, what's their recourse? They're highly unlikely to sue because if you haven't got any, people only sue people who've got money. Yeah. And the recourse would be you'd have to take it down if they raise an objection.
Yeah, and if they've seen that picture before and they've liked it, then you're kind of all right. It's mostly just know somebody likes their image. Yeah. You never want to annoy somebody and put something up that they don't look good in. If I kind of going through my edit, that's one of my biggest things. If I kind of think, you know, great, so everything else can be amazing. If that person doesn't quite look, I don't want to. Yeah,
whereas my partner does the opposite. She picks the pictures I don't like and then puts them on her social.
Just throws you under the bus.
Yeah.
As long as she looks
just straight
good.
under the bus. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Me. Do you think that with the invention of the internet and social media, do you think it's easier for people to become well known for phone photography if they've got a decent portfolio?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, to be honest. Like, it's just amazing to have all of that at your fingertips, to be able to advertise yourself and network and build connections and meet people, you know, who are doing similar things that you want to do. I think it's awesome. I think, you know, someone like Art Stryber, the guy I was mentioning that puts all of his stuff online, people will say, why do you give away all your background information to what you do? And he said, well, if somebody wants to go off and hire 6 Octas and 3, you know, massive light banks, and
play to them. Yeah.
Go for it. You know, because now everything's shot behind the scenes anyway. That kind of information gets out.
But do you think then it becomes a really, really flooded competitive marketplace with every sort of every man and his dog calling himself a photographer that you've got to compete with?
But it's quite quick that if somebody's only shooting with a camera, it's going to be quite quickly levelled out, isn't it? Yeah. It's. I mean, I think what's really good for you guys is that you can be your own marketing managers and you can create your own business and think of yourselves as business owners first and foremost. I know you're creatives and you're artists and everything, but so is every other creative and artist out there. And the ones that get really, you know, get good jobs are the ones that kind of treat themselves, treat your time, you know, be precious about your time, be guarded about the projects that you do. You know, you will have to do stuff for nothing and you will have to build it, but as long as it works for you, not just for the other person. You can do the odd favour for people, but don't constantly say yes because you've got a good camera and people think it costs nothing. Your time is expensive.
But it is awesome. You can make your photography your shop front.
Yeah, totally.
What about like copywriting and stuff like that? How would you feel if like one of the? I mean, some of these pictures are amazing. I could screen grab Cav there and shove it on my website and not.
Yeah, you
and
could
not
just take a
credit you.
screenshot of it.
Yeah, but how would you feel about that? That's them taking your stuff.
I might have a word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, but that must happen a lot. I could.
Well,
I could
probably
collate
don't see
an
half of
Instagram.
it,
I
to
could
be
collate
honest.
an Instagram, Richard Knight photographer, and I've just
Yeah.
cropped pictures from all of my favourite photographers, and everyone would go, "Wow, mint."
Well, I've got like, the copyright at
Yeah.
the bottom
So
of the
you-
page, and then
yeah.
if you try and right-click on it, it does say rights reserved.
Yeah.
So I suppose if I wanted to take
Yeah.
you
You,
to
so
task,
you have put some
I've put
protections
some
in
kind of
place.
privacy
Yeah.
protection on there. So you can't actually right-click and download a big image. You can just,
Yeah.
you can only take a screenshot of it.
Yeah. One more.
What are the mental challenges behind being a photographer?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest things is just keeping that motivation going, and like keeping. You can have like lots of things potentially lined up, and then you can just get like half of them just get cancelled or get postponed, and you've always got to be polite and nice and lovely to people. You can be like, oh no, that shoot's not happening next week. You go, oh, that's cool. And you just think, it's not. That's shit. But, you don't have a choice in it. And you just kind of think, yeah, fine, great. When might we be doing it again? Or when do you think it will be scheduled for later? Just be easygoing and polite. But then be careful not to book yourself up with things that are still questionable. That's what I've learned more recently, is I had a wodge of stuff in May, and then a lot of it didn't come off. But I hadn't searched any other work out, because I thought, well, I'll be overloaded. So in some respects, get yourself to a point where you are overloaded. If people aren't going to commit to certain days and book you down, then just keep looking for work as well. It's a balance. So I think freelance, not always having regular money coming in, having to know other ways around earning some money sometimes if you need to, whatever that is, waitering, bar work, whatever. Do some jobs that you don't like, but they pay quite well. I used to shoot taps and radiators. They're not going to go on my website, but I'd get £500 a day for doing that. And that was kind of a nice gig, because it was just a bit of a fun gig. It was dead easy, there was no editing, in, out, and it was £1,000 in 2 days. So
Wow.
don't be afraid to do jobs that are not glamorous or cool or
So that's photographing-
interesting. Just don't put them online.
Photographing
Don't let anybody
plumbing
see it.
equipment for catalogue.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that
Wow.
as well. For a friend, I earned loads doing that.
Yeah,
That was ace.
so there you go.
You don't need to crow about it. Just only
Yeah.
tell people the things you want them to see.
Just personality-wise, when I'm working on sets, the unit stills photographers are like ninjas.
Yeah.
You don't see them; they're silent, and they're just around. Dean Rogers used to be amazing at it.
Yeah.
You'd be in a pub set, say, and you'd go around everybody who's there, and then Dean would say something. Christ, Dean's here, Jesus! He's just like in, like really quietly, kind of picking off stuff, and it would just occasionally just slide into the centre of the space, take a few shots, and slide out again. And then he got then his work is on like the poster and all over the London Underground and everything. It's pretty,
and you're thinking, how did you
get
get
pretty
that?
cool.
And he got it because he's got
Yeah.
everybody's trust that he's shooting, and people are used to him being there.
But-
And sometimes I shoot just looking through the screen, not looking. When you've got your camera up here, you're immediately creating a block. So quite often I'll shoot there. But people get so used to you just silently shooting
Yeah.
that they can't be bothered after a while.
You must get, but there must be just a creative rewarding now. Like Flux Gourmet. Has anyone seen Flux Gourmet?
Yeah, probably not.
Holy crap, you're
Yeah,
missing
it is
out. It's
good,
one of
yeah.
my favourite. It's my favourite Peter Strickland film. It's the funniest film I've seen all year. I found it hilarious. It's got food fighting in it and crazy shit.
It is good. It's beautifully shot.
The supermarket mime montages are so funny. They're brilliant. Anyway, yeah.
What was your
Billy, you can't even touche. Sorry, the question was, there must be some creative kick about that. You go down into London and then Flux Gourmet's advert. You open in Empire magazine and there's a still from the
Oh, I
film,
need
which
to
is
send
your
him some
thing,
pictures.
and so you're
I
feeling
need to
now
send
like
those pictures.
that's you out there, yeah. So
Yeah, it just takes
feels
a while to
pretty good.
build, and then
But
you kind of have to
creatively,
be ready to. Yeah, I think so.
You
But
get because I do when my location photography is on the cinema screens. I'm like, yeah, mecca. It
well, I
feels
took
like
a little
working.
video, didn't I, of the credits going up,
You did.
and then posted it on Instagram, and because it said, stills photography.
Yeah,
Lisa
so
Stonehouse.
pride in your work and
Yeah,
seeing it
huge,
out there.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Not
that's the
so-
stuff
not
that you
so
can
much
really
the tech.
push and push and push sort of thing. Yeah.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, probably. Sorry.
Brilliant. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Lisa Stonehouse and Richard Knight.